And they waved all smiling at me, and I thought, I can't, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed. I should not have to do this. I have 2 degrees. I have student loans and bachelor's degrees and 14 years experience. I should not have to come ask for food.
Dana Goldstein is national correspondent for the New York Times, author of The Teacher Wars, A History of America's Most Embattled Profession, which is a fantastic book, I have to say. Pedro Noguera is professor of education, director of the Center for Transformation in Schools at UCLA, and Dave Jamison's a labor reporter for HuffPo. And Dave, you have been covering these strikes, talking to teachers. What is going on?
Well, this is really about a lack of investment in public schools from the teacher's standpoint. In a lot of these states, the math is actually pretty simple. Everybody had to rein in school spending during the Great Recession, but in these states where we're now seeing these revolts, you look at West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona, these are states that actually during the recovery went on to cut taxes as well. So you've had this falling revenue, and now there's no money to give teachers. And so you have educators who've gone 4 years, 6 years, 10 years without a meaningful raise, and they're pretty tired of it. So the pay is just one part of it. I mean, you talk to these folks, the first thing they bring up is how their textbooks are falling apart, how they can't keep teachers in their schools, how teachers are leaving for other states that pay better, and they really see it as a crisis.
The austerity, Dana, is so severe. This stat is the one that blows my mind. 20% of Oklahoma schools have 4-day weeks. That's like, forget labor conditions and whether teachers are being paid. Like, that is just not sufficient to educate a populace.
Right, it is shocking. And imagine the bind that puts parents in to find childcare on that 5th day of the week. It is a truly radical situation because of the austerity budgeting. There's no textbooks. I visited schools in Tulsa that are rationing paper for teachers and students. So this is something that parents and kids are feeling. It's not just about the teacher's salary.
And do you get the sense that there was support? I mean, one of the things we saw in West Virginia was really interesting was, West Virginia is a state that's got a very, storied labor history, but it's also a very conservative state. You saw a lot of support for the teachers there from students and parents. Did you get the same sense when you're in Oklahoma?
So this walkout will not work without parent and community support. And I think what teachers are worried about in Oklahoma is that the legislature did vote last week and the governor signed a bill that would supposedly give them a $6,000 raise. And some folks are saying, hey, isn't that enough for you? Why are you asking for more? Now, teachers are saying we want more for the kids. We want more money for textbooks to have those 5-day school weeks. So they're still on strike.
Insane extravagance. Pedro, there's a huge conversation constantly about teachers' unions. It has been sort of at the center of the conversation. These states, you've got these sort of educational associations, but largely these are places that don't have collective bargaining, where this is being done as a kind of grassroots organizing effort.
I think that's what makes it so impressive. And it's likely that we'll see this happen in other states as well, because throughout the South and in other right-to-work states, places like Kansas, there have been cuts to education, and teachers have been barely scraping by. And I think they've seen from the success in West Virginia that collective action does make a difference, even in the so-called right-to-work states.
This idea of austerity is really central here to what David Jamison was saying, Dana, that the idea that we're still living with the Great Recession, that stuff got cut to the bone. And then when the recovery comes back, these state houses get to choose what they're doing with that budget surplus. A lot of places still working off the 2010, 2011 template.
So Oklahoma has really historically low income taxes, very, very low production taxes on oil and gas. They're beginning to say, hey, let's raise those production taxes a little bit, but it's still much lower than some other states with an energy sector. So yeah, this is a state that has really had a tax cut orthodoxy, and now the public and teachers are saying, hold on a second, maybe we went too far with this.
David, what are the politics of this like? These are states where public teachers are in these states are, I don't know if you polled them, but are probably maybe a majority Republicans, or certainly something like 50-50, a lot of Trump voters. This is not like a bastion of like lefty activism. What are the politics around this like?
Yeah, it's very interesting. As he said, it is definitely a mix. I've talked to people who stand on both sides of the aisle when they vote here, but I think there's a broad agreement that the funding has been really lacking, and there's tremendous anger directed at. In these states are generally we're talking all Republican controlled, each branch of government here, and so It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in November. You know, talking with teachers in West Virginia, I talked to some who really until now had never been politically active, and they were saying afterwards, after their victory, they were saying we're really going to hold people's feet to the fire come November. So, and you look at Arizona, where there's going to be an open Senate seat. I think there really could be broad political ramifications from this.
Do you agree with that, Pedro?
I do. I think that teachers as an organized force, their ability to influence politics at the state level, at the local level, is going to be very significant in the next election. And as we said, that we've seen these cuts, but we've also seen attacks on teachers for the last several years in the name of reform. Teachers and unions have been blamed for the state of public education. And what we've completely ignored is that the conditions in our schools have been allowed to deteriorate, and we've put our kids in very substandard conditions, and teachers are speaking out about that as well. It's ironic that at a time when they want to arm teachers, they don't want to pay them salaries that they're clearly deserving of.
You know, there's a really interesting gender dynamic here as well. It's something that you write about in Teacher Wars, which is a phenomenal book about the sort of gendered nature of the labor of teaching for years. And when you look at those pictures, when you think about the sort of core of political resistance in this era and a lot of political activation, it is a lot of women who are sort of driving this political militancy we've seen.
Yeah, this profession is 3/4 female. And as I talk to teachers across the country that are participating in these protests, they're saying they are inspired by Me Too. They're inspired by Black Lives Matter. They're inspired by all sorts of resistance movements that have really sprung up since President Trump was elected. You know, we pay teachers so little historically because we assume they have a spouse that makes more money. But when I'm talking to teachers in Oklahoma, that's not true. Someone's teacher might be a house painter, a firefighter. They're not making a ton more money than the teacher, or they may be making less. So the teacher's wage should be a living wage and needs to be a living wage. That's the message I'm hearing.
All right, Dana Goldstein, Pedro Noguera, and Dave Jamieson, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, the propaganda.